Greetings to the students of the wonderful Saybrook University. Please listen to everything that Dr. Worley tells you, because he learnt everything he knows from the great Eric Walmart. Okay, well, my name is Dr. Debbie Joffe Ellis, and I'm a psychologist. Got my license in Australia. I'm also licensed in New York as a mental health counsellor. And a great joy in my life is the fact that Albert Ellis and I were husband and wife. Before being with him, REBT was something I taught and used in my clinical practice. I love it because it's holistic. So what I love about rational emotive behaviour therapy is that it's practical. If one uses the methods, tools and techniques, change is possible, and with ongoing work and practice, positive changes are sustained. And what I particularly love about REBT is its philosophical component, in which it emphasises the importance of developing unconditional self-acceptance, unconditional other acceptance, and unconditional life acceptance. And REBT reminds us it's not enough to just think in our heads, oh yes, I had better forgive that person, have compassion. To think it without feeling it is really not authentically being it. And so REBT reminds us that if we don't genuinely feel compassion and unconditional acceptance for others, we can develop it. We can work on having it by changing our thinking into healthy, rational thinking, which allows that possibility. So I was saying that I love the holistic approach of REBT, which gives us the how-tos, the actions to take for positive change, for healthy change, as well as the heartful component of reminding us to practice kindness and compassion to ourselves and others and life itself. I'll start from his childhood because, in fact, some of the seeds that flowered into core components of REBT, Al planted during his childhood, or perhaps it's more accurate to say recognised and or developed. When he was a young boy, he was very, very ill, actually throughout his childhood, and he had to be hospitalised often. And his parents rarely would visit him in the hospital. They had two younger children and were busy, and the father travelled with his work. And Al, little Al, often felt very lonely and depressed, understandably. The other children in his ward had parents who were there doting over them and all. And Al writes about this period where he was in hospital for about 8+ months, and he was around 4.5. And he made the decision, in whatever language in one's mind a 4.5-year-old thinks, is he didn't like feeling so sad and lonely. Unlike other children who might have felt very immersed in depression and become very isolated, may have whined, screamed, and Al looked for a solution. Al looked to suffer less. So he went to the hospital library and borrowed books and read and reread them. He would talk to parents who visited their children. He would make up games and play with the other children. And particularly funny, some people think of the games when the lights were out that Al made up, which involved flashlights and doing funny things. But what Al was doing was distracting himself from thinking the thoughts that contributed to his experience of depression. and instead doing things that were enjoyable. This was to become the cognitive distraction aspect of REBT. Then, when he was a teenager, he suffered from intense panic and anxiety and fear of talking to girls and or women, which was a pity as his hormones kicked in and he wanted to go out on dates and he was too afraid to speak with girls. So he gave himself the homework of, over the month of August, talking to 100 women, girls in the Bronx Botanical Gardens. The goal was, number one, to make dates, and number two, a bigger and more important goal, to get over his terror of talking with them. He thought of this because he had read the works of behaviourist John Watson and his approach helping little children get over their phobias by gradually exposing the children to whatever they were afraid of over time, and in the end most of them were quite happily playing with whatever originally they were afraid of. Okay, so Al spoke with 100 women over the month of August, made one date. She didn't show up, but he got over his terror and his fear because he experienced that nothing terrible happened. So she didn't show up, so he was rejected, not the end of the world. He lost his fears, anxiety and panic. And this became a part of REBT, whereby we practitioners encourage people who have irrational fears, phobias and anxieties to take healthy risks, to push themselves to do uncomfortably what they want to get comfortable at. Shall I keep going? Okay. When Al was a young adult, he was madly in love with a woman called Carol, who, by the way, was his first wife for 18 hours, but they remained friends for all of his life. She died in 2001. In any case, he was madly in love with her. He described her as very sexy and attractive, but somewhat neurotic in her behaviours. She would be on again, off again. Al would declare his love and want to be with her forever, and sometimes she'd be yes and other times no. Well, one night, after a very romantic episode, as he was leaving, she said, "Al, I think we need a break. I need to get to know other men." Well, the young Albert Ellis was devastated. He had convinced himself that he must be with her in order to have a happy life, and he adored her. And in this kind of frantic feeling of desperation and loss and grief, he went to his Bronx Botanical Gardens and was walking and contemplating. And just as he had decided when he was 4.5, he decided he did not want to suffer this torture and turmoil anymore. How was it being created? And he realized it wasn't Carol acting on again, off again and rejecting him that was creating his inner agony. It was his demands that she should respond in kind to his love, that she shouldn't be on again, off again. He realized that he didn't need her in order to be happy in his life, that even if with her he might be more happy some of the time, he could, if he so chose, focus on other things and absorbing interests in order to experience happiness about other things. So he lost his desperation by dropping his demandingness that he must have her and she should act in this way, and it's awful when this happened. He dropped all that, and when he started thinking rationally, ironically, she wanted him back. But here were very vital aspects of REBT. Cherchez le should. That if we don't want to feel anxious or depressed or enraged, which are debilitating negative emotions, look for the demand, because there will be an implicit or explicit must or should or ought. He realized that. He also realized the harmfulness of overgeneralizing. I need this to be happy, and if not, I can never be happy. Overgeneralizing. Nonsense. And by the way, in addition to that self-realization, he studied the works of Alfred Korzybski and general semantics, which also reminds us of the harmfulness of overgeneralizing. So what I'm hoping that you understand is that even though Al did much, much research, and REBT is an evidence-based, good scientific approach, it is the pioneering cognitive approach. You know, it preceded the excellent work of Beck and Glasser, Hayes, Linehan, you know, other cognitive behavioural approaches that came 10, 20, 30, 40 years after Al. And some of them sometimes have acknowledged what an influence the groundbreaking work of Al was on their own development of their theories and approaches. So, so I was saying, so in addition to REBT coming from Al's research of philosophers and behaviourists and other therapists of the time, Alfred Adler was a large influence. Al was a fellow in the Hypnosis Society of APA. He practiced hypnosis for a while. So there were many influences. The Stoics, you know, the ancient philosophers, Eastern, Western, classical. In addition to all of those, which Al frequently acknowledged, I put that in because some of our great contributors in our field don't always acknowledge those from whom they learnt much. Al did. Al was, whilst having a kind of personality that was out there, some people recognised and some didn't that behind that was the softest, gentlest heart of gold. He was the most authentically caring human one could hope to meet. Authentic. Back to the point I'm trying to make, and I'm distracting myself, but it's all connected. In addition to the research, much of REBT, I hope you already understand, was born from Al's finding ways to cope with his own emotional struggles, successful ways. He was his own guinea pig. And as a result of that, number one, I believe REBT has a kind of common sense, real life feel to it, even though it is evidence-based and has all those components to it as well. And Al wrote in a way that both the academic and the non-academic could understand, and therefore, if they so choose, could easily understand the tools, techniques, and if they so chose, could apply them. Millions of people wrote to Al, and many people have written to me, sharing how much REBT changed their lives for the better. Many wrote that REBT saved their lives. A few of the main aspects of REBT are as follows. The first one is, it's not what happens that creates a person's emotional experience. It's what the person tells themselves about what happens. In other words, their perception of it. There's a story that Al used to tell. When I say Al, I mean Dr. Albert Ellis, who was my husband, and I called him Al, so I'm calling him Al. He used to tell this story of two beautiful, no, I'm sorry, cancel that. He used to tell this story of two monks, celibate monks in their orange robes, somewhere in Asia, walking by mountains, and there was a stream on a gorgeous day, of a very strict order. They prayed 20 hours a day, did their mantras, vegetarian, do no harm, celibate, celibate, celibate. A beautiful woman was approaching them. Now, one of the monks was a young novice, about 17 years old, and the other one was an older, wise monk. The woman came right up to them, and she said, "Oh, great Swamis, I'm terrified of water and I need to cross this stream and I know it's not very high, but I'm afraid. Please, could you help me get across? Well, the young monk was about to refuse because you don't touch women, etc., etc. The older monk picked her up, put her across his shoulders, carried her across the stream and put her down. She said, "Oh, thank you, great Swami." She went on her way and the monks went on theirs. Well, the younger monk was furious. He was thinking, how could this older monk touch a woman, her skin against his skin? That's against our order. And he's thinking and getting angrier and angrier. After about 20 minutes, he could hold in his words no longer. He said, "Swamiji, how could you do such a thing? Lift a woman, her skin against your skin? How could you do it?" To which the older monk said, "Young boy, I put that woman down 20 minutes ago. You're still carrying her with you." And the moral of the story very much relates to this aspect of REBT. It wasn't the carrying of a female that created rage. It was this young lad's telling himself it was awful, it was terrible, it shouldn't be done. So, first aspect of REBT, it's not what happens, what you tell yourself about what happens that creates your emotional experience. Secondly, with awareness we have choice. Unlike other animals, Al used to say, humans can think about their thinking. Other animals can think, but we can be aware and think about, am I thinking in healthy ways, which will create appropriate and healthy emotions, or am I thinking in irrational, unhealthy ways, which creates debilitating, unhealthy negative emotions such as rage, depression, anxiety, shame, guilt, jealousy, fear, etc. The next aspect of REBT offers us the ABC approach, which your marvellous teachers will share with you. And they will point out with you, with this ABC approach, one identifies the activating event and then recognises the C, the consequence, either behaviourally or emotionally. If they're destructive ones, then you go to B. B stands for beliefs, or Al used to say the bullshit you tell yourself. And you do detective work and you look for the irrational beliefs about the activating event that led to the unhealthy response. When you have identified them, and to do that you look for the should, the must, the demand, any damning of self or other or of life, any catastrophizing or putting things out of perspective. When you've got those beliefs, and your teachers will tell you more about them, dispute, dispute, dispute with vigour in a practical, logical and pragmatic, well that's practical way, realistic, pragmatic, logical way, dispute and come up with effective new philosophies, new healthy beliefs that you remind yourself over and over again. You can call it healthy brainwashing, self-hypnosis of healthy ideas. For that to last, ongoing work and effort and practice is needed. To persist, to persist, to persist, and that will allow change. A very important part of REBT is unconditional acceptance, USA, unconditional self-acceptance, UOA, unconditional other acceptance, and ULA, unconditional life acceptance. Your teachers will tell you more about those. So I urge you to study REBT, to enjoy it, to learn it, but not just keep it here, to practice it. And the result of that will be an authentic stability, serenity, and quality of life in which you don't create unnecessary misery, in which when there is suffering through loss and pain, which is inevitable in life, you will experience a healthy grief and response, but not be debilitated. You'll minimize suffering and experience more joy in this one life we have. And Al used to remind us to relish it and cherish it, because time goes, and once it goes, you can never get it back. So minimize your suffering, maximize your joy. You're very fortunate to be studying at Saybrook. It's a great university, and your teachers, fantastic. So been wonderful talking with you.